Generation Z is the most materialistic generation in at least 100 years. And in this video, I'm going to explain how I know this is the case and why this is the case. Welcome to Analyzing Finance with Nick. This video is going to intersect on generational dynamics and macroeconomic trends to answer the question, who is the most materialistic generation and why Gen Z became that way? Well, let's first start. How did I come to this assumption of Gen Z being the most materialistic generation? First, if you look at work surveys, according to Monster.com, 70% of American Gen Z made salary and pay their top work motivator, and health insurance, which is basically a financial benefit, as the second one. Gen Z is also the highest percentage of their workforce starting with six-figure salaries or greater under 25. However, a lot of that is really just driven by inflation, and six figures really not meaning as much as it did in the past. Whereas millennials had a more priority of making a difference, the values of the company they're working at, longer term upside potential, and a chance to grow and develop their skills were all higher priorities than just outright pay. Whereas with Gen Zs, they're just more bottom line. And I'll have citations with all my sources for these things. The second thing is they're way ahead on the savings game. Gen Zs are saving at much higher rates than millennials and X's and boomers did at the same age. They started researching financial planning as young as 13 years old, whereas just growing up as a millennial myself, the only people who were researching financial planning were ones who were taught it at a young age by their parents or grandparents. And when it comes to Gen Zers as well, they have higher percentage of them have savings accounts, checking accounts, and credit cards under the age of 21 compared to previous generations. And with their purchases, 72% of Gen Zers say that cost is the most important factor for making a purchase. Gen Z saving bias also has them less likely to spend on things such as travel, such as pursuing experiences such as fine dining or music festivals or going to events. And they are less likely than millennials by a 40% margin to spend above their needs to catch up with their social life. They'd rather stay at home and save money than go out and spend money to just be around other people in person. So the other thing really, outside of the compensation and the savings approach, these is other aspects of life too. Gen Z cares way more about how much money their romantic partner has than other generations have in the past. According to a study done by Northwestern Mutual, they surveyed a bunch of people across different generations, and 49% of Gen Zers view financial compatibility more important than physical attraction. That is compared more to 40% of millennials, 35% of Gen Xers, and 30% of baby boomers. And a lot of criticism of modern dating of it being just more transactional in nature, where you have young women caring a lot more about superficial money things such as the 6-5 finance trust fund meme, and men going the passport route because they feel like it's a more cost efficient way to get the same or better romantic outcome than dating at home, are just kind of reflections of a broader idea where younger people, particularly Gen Z, want to get the most bang out of their buck. And this frugality is translating to stinginess in how they approach dating and relationships. And that stinginess comes out in different ways depending on your gender. And so you have all of these point to really just a more bottom line materialistic generation. And the question is, why has Gen Z become this way? I talked about my reaction to Neil Ferguson. There was this chart which showed that most traditional American values such as faith, such as having kids or getting married or career development or education or patriotism or community service are all much lower priority for Gen Z than previous generations. The only quote unquote value or priority that has gotten more for Gen Z is making money and stacking that cash, and the speed of it too. Again, that's what probably explains the popularity of influencers such as Andrew Tate or the Sprinkle Sprinkle lady. It's this idea that I need to get my money and I need to get it fast because I may not have a chance to get it in the future. And this difference towards the bottom line actually means that the long-term financial situation of the average American's personal balance sheet is likely going to improve drastically as the boomers who are more free spending retire, and you have the Gen Z who are more savings focused are the primary chunk of the workforce. That's the how. Let's go to the why. And there are several variables on why this is the case. First, the one is growing up during the financial crisis. If you were born between 1997 and 2012, you likely saw in your early childhood years living during the financial crisis or in the echo of the financial crisis, where your family had a material downgrade in their living standards because of either losing a job because of the GFC, losing a house because of the GFC, or their financial assets going down and them not selling before the stock market came back up. And the result is what is perceived to be, previous generations thought that you got consistently growing living standards, and that by default, if you work hard and get an education, your quality of life will improve and the rest will take care of itself. Well, the 2008 and the increased level of income inequality and how changed the dynamic in a way that that's not really a guarantee anymore. They saw their millennial siblings or peers or previous examples go to college, graduate, and have nothing to show for it because of the GFC and a bad job market after, and they are poorer than their parents at their same age, and the Gen Zers don't want to repeat that. The other thing is a financial variable here that I think that impacts this type of materialism is the 15 years we had of ZIRP. ZIRP, or zero interest rate policy, was the Fed, in order to kind of help spark the economy, did is they held interest rates to 0% essentially from 2008 to 2015, and then again from 2020 to 2022. And that long stretch of zero interest rates basically was a signal to society that saving and being financially responsible and preparing for the long run is a fool's errand. You live for the now because your future is likely worth less than it is today. And when you have positive inflation but zero interest rates, literally the market is pricing the value of the future being less than today. So that means you don't have the patience to work hard and develop a longer term plan, because there may not be a long term, one, or two, it's just gonna, if the cost of living just accelerates faster than your pay, it's a treadmill that you can't run faster than. So what's the point? I need to get the money now so I can be an asset holder and catch up with inflation rather than always trying to chase it. And this is, so that YOLO type mentality, and also just I need the money now, is developed by the shortened time horizon that has been created as a byproduct of ZIRP. This is also probably why you have a more materialistic view of relationships, because I can't count on marrying a young guy now who doesn't have money, because there's a good chance that he will never be successful. As we've seen, like the millennials, 50% of them have a lower inflation-adjusted income than their parents did at the same age. And a young woman who's saying, I don't have time for that. I want to have a family now, or I want to live a good life now, and I don't want to wait on some guy who's never going to make it, so why don't I just go for the established now? And so that is impacting that's also part of the shortened time horizon. But it's not just ZIRP that's shortening time horizons. The other thing is housing costs and inequality being more aware of due to social media. With social media, you can now see that the fact that there are rich people who live way better lives than you, that you want now, and you likely are not going to be able to catch up to them working a normal job. Before, I mean, people in theory knew this existed, but it just wasn't in your face all the time, unless you lived in one of these really big cities or near one of these affluent suburbs. Your average American middle-class person, just it wasn't part of their awareness how extreme the very, very elites live. But now it's all in your face all the time. It makes you feel like, wait, I want that. And I want to enjoy it before I'm too old, when I gotta make money fast so that I can do that eventually. Then, as I mentioned for other reasons, is that secularism. With religion, there was a purpose of life beyond just your short-term material satisfaction. There was a foundation, a spiritual foundation of why somebody should do the right thing, and a greater purpose of things to live for beyond just your own material success. But with secularism comes materialism, and not materialism is in the form of conspicuous consumption, but materialism in the classic sense that the only thing that matters is the physical and the tangible. And Gen Zs are more secular than previous generations, and thus are likely to have a philosophically materialist worldview. And philosophical materialism also tends to lead to consumption-based materialism, which is the more colloquial definition of it. And the last variable really I'm going to talk about is housing costs. Housing costs are much higher. Most middle-class jobs were previously able to allow people to buy some sort of property in their city. But now with housing prices accelerating much faster than inflation, that's just also a byproduct of ZERP, because housing prices often traded inverse to the bond market, and people were willing to pay higher prices for low mortgage rates, but a lot of young people were locked out because that required a higher down payment. And you had years of other structural things, so I've talked about in several videos, keep housing prices high. And so now they're like, hey, I want to buy a house. I need to make more money now to buy a house, and I'll never be able to afford one if I just am patient. And the other thing is that I saw my millennial peers who tried to start businesses or try to work up the corporate path and participate in the Gary Vee style hustle culture, and they still have nothing, or they still are short of a down payment, or if they do buy a house, it's not a nice one as their parents had at the same age. So I need to focus just on being paid now, and if I'm not going to get paid enough that I can get to the level of being able to buy a nice house, I want good work-life balance, and I don't want to work the bare minimum I need to survive. So that is a root of a lot of what's going on here with why Gen Z is materialist. So the bottom line is really ZERP had shortened time horizons. High housing costs and visible inequality give the idea that there's no point in getting ahead, that I should either do the bare minimum or I gotta max out the money game ethics be darned. And then also the scars of seeing a lot of millennials who've either frivolously spent their money on experiences instead of tangible investments or items, or just they worked hard and prioritized personal growth and entrepreneurship or hustling up the corporate ladder, and it didn't really get them to the finish line anyway. It's like, I prioritize having the cash now, and the lack of other values or causes, whether it's religion or community service or patriotism or family, which are not a priority. So all these combined really just lead to the idea of money being more important to Gen Z than other variables. And because of that, Gen Z is the most materialistic generation. Let me know what you think about this. Gen Zers, do you think I'm wrong? You think us millennials are a lot more selfish and materialistic than you are? Or that the boomers or the Xers are? Feel free to comment. I would love to make this a discussion. Thanks for watching.